Hello, and welcome back to Shock's Talks. I'm Shakti, and we're just going to jump right in today. So, we're talking about the weekend of November 17th through the 18th, 2023. And the Soul Foundation is holding a really big UAP conference with a focus on UAP policy and legislation. There's a huge lineup of amazing speakers. This foundation was formed in August 2023 and is the newest UAP research group. A little side note, I'm going to be talking about Russell Targ later in this episode. He's our topic for the World of Thoughts Part 2. Part 1 was in the last episode. And he has roots at Stanford University also, specifically SRI, the Stanford Research Institute. So this event was not live streamed, and as far as I know, you had to basically apply to get invited to go and attend these lectures. But I did find out through Facebook that a community member and Facebook friend of mine was able to attend. So I'm hoping I can pick his brain and find out more about what goes down at this conference. And it's also possible that they'll be posting videos after this weekend. So I'll be keeping an eye out for all of that, and I'll definitely keep you all posted on anything that I learn. So the founders of Soul are Dr. Gary Nolan and Peter Skafish. Gary Nolan is the professor in the Department of Pathology at Stanford University School of Medicine, and Skafish is a sociocultural anthropologist who has held faculty and research positions in France, Canada, Germany, and the United States. I've linked their site below, and you can read their full bios on that website. Lester Nair made a post about this event on his TikTok and pointed out that the lineup of speakers for day one is almost entirely PhDs. So they're making a point here in terms of the effort to take this topic seriously. You have Harvard professor and theoretical physicist Avi Loeb, Jacques Vallée, who some consider to be the father of ufology, and Diana Walsh-Pasulka, a writer and professor of religious studies at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And Pasulka just came out with a new book called Encounters. I have a copy of it here. Haven't started it yet. It just arrived. This book on the cover says Experiences with Non-Human Intelligences, Explorations with UFOs, Dreams, Angels, AI, and Other Dimensions. So this sounds really exciting and is totally in line with everything we've been talking about in this series. Also on the lineup, I saw Leslie Kean, who, if you remember, was the one who broke the big article in the New York Times in 2017 about UAPs. Her book about UFOs I've been talking about on this channel in many episodes, and I also saw Hal Puthoff on that lineup, who worked directly with Russell Targ, who I'll be talking about today, on remote viewing and research around remote viewing. And there were many others, some who I recognized and some names who are new to me. So it'll be cool to find out what they all had to say. This is an interdisciplinary look at the topic, and it's basically the cream of the crop in terms of speakers who have high credibility and have made meaningful contributions to the study of UFOs and the phenomena surrounding them. So again, I'm excited to find out what happens. And I'm just going to read you a little bit from the Soul Foundation's website so you can get a taste of what they're talking about, or what they're all about, and then we'll dive into the World of Thoughts Part 2. So this is from their site. The time has come for serious, well-funded, and cutting-edge academic research into the nature of unidentified aerial phenomena and their broad cosmological and political implications. Such a claim would have been beyond the pale of respectability just 5 years ago, but the US government's recent and continued acknowledgments of UAP have changed them from a subject unworthy of academic consideration into a scientific and intellectual problem of unfathomably broad stakes. Now that UAP are considered real enough by Congress to be addressed with federal legislation, we are forced to consider the broad consequences of this for the future of science, technology, economy, politics, law, religion, culture, and all other human institutions and endeavors. The Sol Foundation, and that's SOL, is accordingly establishing itself as a premier center for UAP research. Under the direction of academic and government experts already professionally engaged in the study of UAP, the Foundation is assembling teams of noted specialists in the natural sciences, the social sciences, the humanities and engineering, information science, and other technology focused disciplines. Collectively, these teams will undertake rigorous, methodical, and cutting edge inquiry into UAP and their implications, as well as help set the agenda for UAP studies. So, we've heard a lot of claims before with different groups that come and go. Arrow, for example, has not really been able to get the funding or support to be effective yet. And maybe there was some shady stuff going on around all of that, or maybe it just didn't have the right people to really become consequential. NASA made their intentions known in the briefing they held 2 months ago, but it all felt a little fake. And that's because they acted like they have no idea what's going on, and this is just the beginning for the study of UFOs and UAP, and that's just really hard to believe given the history. So every time a new group pops onto the scene and claims that they're going to take all of this seriously, we can only hope that that group is full of courageous and persistent individuals who have strong financial backing and will really make good on their word. This new group, the Soul Foundation, does seem to have some really good people involved with it based on the conference lineup, so we'll see what they can accomplish. It's all very exciting. The momentum continues, and there will definitely be more UAP news soon when we find out if the Schumer rounds amendment gets passed. And I heard that that might be happening in the next month or so, and I'll definitely do an episode to cover that. I've talked about it in the past. I won't dig into it all now, but you can look it up online, and I've placed a link below as well. 2023 has a lot of disclosure hype, so we'll see what goes on with this continued build in activities through 2024. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to zoom out and look at these years one by one and say, like, look, these are all the things that were happening. What kind of patterns can we identify? Some things to keep in mind. There's a long history of disinformation, so there's always a good chance that some kinds of agents of disinformation are still working hard to keep the big secrets secret. This is pretty much a guarantee. There's a long history of independent researchers and journalists, historians, and authors on this topic, and keeping up with those people is just as important, if not more, than whatever is happening in the mainstream, in my opinion. There are some pretty crazy theories about possible deals made by world governments with various ET groups, and this could all be full-blown paranoia, but if there's any truth to it, that's the last thing any government is about to admit to ever. So we might have to stay realistic with our expectations and basically bypass big power structures when it comes to accessing more information. We can't really rely on them to tell us what they know. They're probably never going to tell us everything that they know. There are theories about scientific knowledge being kept from the public, as well as certain advanced technologies, some of which could be of use to the people, some of which are probably all about war. And then there's the interdimensional implications of some of the data. So there's a lot of threads to follow. In the end, this is definitely going to have to involve activists and honestly outsiders, rebels, underdogs, whistleblowers, and even the kooks who you want to just laugh at and ignore. Don't be so quick to judge what is weird. This whole thing is weird. Just because all of these PhDs are joining the party now doesn't mean they're saying anything new. In fact, a lot of them are just saying things that have already been said, even though I'm sure we're all happy to have the conversations gain more legitimacy. And there are some honest seekers or researchers out there in this new group that are really bringing something nice to the table. So it's all really exciting and interesting, but it has been going on for a long time, and, keep on looking into the past and checking out the books that have been published starting all the way back in the 50s. The bottom line is something real has been and is continuing to go on world over, and it's touched many lives already. It's okay to explore the many different theories because we're still trying to figure this thing out. And that's what I'm going to keep doing. Even if it seems crazy or weird, or if I feel like, oh God, like what if I'm wrong? Like I'm going to think about things and consider them and not be afraid to think about things that are outside of what is considered to be good or okay to think about. That's a form of control. So I'm keeping an eye on all of it because this is a really big issue that impacts the entire planet and everyone on it. And it's just absolutely fascinating. My big question is about the non-human physical beings who we might be interacting with. If I could find out one piece of information first, it would be around this. I really want to know, are there physical, actual aliens visiting? Because it's no stretch of the imagination for me to consider non-physical entities or interdimensional beings, but it would be pretty shocking to find out that actual physical aliens from within our physical matter reality, in physical structures created with tech we can't yet understand, are here and interacting with various human groups and individuals. That's the part I want answers on the most. And from what I can tell, based on my research, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that we are, in fact, dealing with other physical beings and that those beings have advanced psi abilities as well. And this is where the remote viewing part of the alien phenomena gets really interesting because many encounters include telepathy. So if we have this innate ability as humans to be telepathic, and that's the sort of language of so many of these non-human entities, it seems like a really important thing for us to think about. What are your big questions? I want to know. Please drop them in the comments. I just want to hear what you think, and if any of this like sparks any questions for you, or like what would you want to find out first? What would be your first question if you could just ask the universe and get the truth? And I did promise in a previous episode that I am not going to ask you to like my videos anymore, but I am going to say thank you to everyone that has subscribed. And for anyone who's new to YouTube, if you want to be notified of when these videos drop, you can hit the little bell and it will notify you of when I post a new video. Last time, we started talking about what I like to call the world of thoughts. And we took a look at a yogi's perspective by exploring the book Thought Power by Swami Shivananda. Today, we're going back into the roots of what is now called remote viewing and has direct ties to UFO research and government programs by way of Russell Targ. Russell Targ is a physicist and author who was a pioneer in the development of the laser and co-founder of the Stanford Research Institute's investigation into psychic abilities in the 1970s and 80s. I've linked his site below, and you can see all the books he's written on there, as well as read his full bio and various articles. And you can search him on YouTube and find interviews with him. I think even Richard Dolan has an interview, which I may have posted in the description box of one of the previous episodes here. So the book by Russell Targ that I'm reading right now is this book, Limitless Mind. A Guide to Remote Viewing and Transformation of Consciousness. And it's part of my World of Thoughts series because he's really saying the same things that Tom Campbell, the Buddha, Shivananda, Yogananda, and various simulation theorists are all saying in their own different ways. We live in a non-local universe. We are consciousness. ESP is natural, and you can be trained to tap into your abilities. So here's Targ's explanation of non-locality from the book. We live in a non-local reality, which is to say that we can be affected by events that are distant from our ordinary awareness. This is an alarming idea for an experimental physicist because it means that laboratory experiments are subject to outside influences that may be beyond the scientist's control or knowledge. And this is such a cool way to start this off because what he's just said there is crucial to Tom Campbell's work and to the experiments that he is running right now in terms of gathering more evidence to support his theory. So I imagine and truly hope we will have more data to support his theory soon as experiments are underway. And all of these things will help us understand the details around what it means to influence the probabilities, future probabilities. So I've linked a video below of Tom Campbell's, and you can check out all of his content on YouTube because him and everyone he's working with is doing a great job of putting up all kinds of videos all the time. But the one I linked is an update on these physics experiments that are happening now. So back to limitless mind. Non-locality is a property of both time and space. In a vivid example of non-locality, studies of identical twins who were separated at birth and reared apart show that the twins share striking similarities in their tastes, interests, spouses, experiences, and professions, beyond what one could reasonably ascribe to their common DNA. And this is a lot like entanglement or Einstein's spooky action at a distance. It's the part of the work that speaks to the very nature of reality, just things we didn't understand, things we didn't know were possible. And Targ also talks about the physics of miracles, spiritual traditions, and then gets into our topic for today, remote viewing. I started talking about the basics of remote viewing in episodes 5 and 15 of Shock's Talks, and here's something from Limitless Mind on the topic. Remote viewing is not a spiritual path, but such psychic functioning is a step in the direction of conscious awareness, non-local mind revealing itself for us to see. In the fall of 1972, Dr. Hal Puthoff and I started a psychic research program at Stanford Research Institute, SRI. We were both laser physicists who carried out research for a variety of U.S. government agencies for many years. Our great partner and teacher in the SRI program was the New York artist and highly respected psychic Ingo Swann. And in the third chapter of my little series within the series, The World of Thoughts, we'll be talking about Ingo Swann, and this is the book that I have of his right now, Natural ESP, Everybody's Guide to Natural ESP. So in Limitless Mind, Targ outlines 4 areas of remote viewing applications. The first is evaluation. So like the weighing of various alternatives, such as an investment or choices of technology or building sites. This evaluation often includes a mixture of psychic ability and non-psychic intuition. The next area is location. Remote viewing has been used to find many things of value, including oil or mineral deposits, hidden treasure, and missing people. So you've probably seen on some TV shows like a police department calling in a psychic or whatever to help out. This is real. This is something that does happen and has been effective. Diagnosis is another area. This includes diagnosis of medical problems, mechanical problems, safety hazards, sources of human error, and health and environmental hazards. These are all possible applications for psychic and intuitive practitioners. And back to Tom Campbell, as always, one of the cool things that I've heard him talk about when he was young, well, in his 30s, and starting to meditate and practice something kind of like a remote viewing skill. He was using it just to help him with his job, and he was a NASA astrophysicist for a while, but he also did other types of physics work, and one of the things he was doing was like meditating and debugging the code that he was working with in the meditation, and it was effective. So that's a very practical application. The fourth area that Targ outlines is forecasting. So, forecasting things like earthquakes, volcanic activity, political conditions, technological developments, weather conditions, interest rates, investment opportunities, and the prices of commodities and currencies. So you can easily see how big, powerful entities would 100% be interested in and invested in learning as much as possible about these abilities. There's no way in hell that the studies around this have stopped. Some have most certainly gone dark, and others are still happening out in the open, and you can learn all about that on the internet. So these guys went through a lot to try to understand what the psychic stuff was all about and what it could or couldn't do. And in the end, I'd say that Tom Campbell's theory does the best job at explaining why all of these things can occur within our reality. And one of my favorite hobbies is cross-checking like other people's research and theories with his theory and deciding whether or not his model still makes sense. And so far, it's like the best one out there, in my opinion. So that's why I'm always talking about him. The early studies around psi abilities, at least in the US, included a lot of surprise around things like precognition or the ability to see into the future. But what Campbell helps to shine a light on is the detail that when you're accessing data from the databases, he would say, you can access probable futures as well as the actual past, alternative pasts, or current information, and that this is all going to be interpreted through the lens of the person doing the remote viewing. In our last episode on the world of thoughts, we talked about the Akashic record, and this is kind of the same idea, but just in different terminology. So what Russell Targ, Hal Puthoff, and Ingo Swann were doing was they were developing systems and protocols to work with the mind in the most effective ways. This is why the art of remote viewing encourages very loose impressions to be recorded in a certain order, including the drawing of shapes and other descriptors before any conclusions are drawn. In this book, you can look at examples of some of these exercises, and there's tons of information online as well. There's even like apps that have been created to help you practice remote viewing and play around with little exercises, and you can get the data verified to see how you did. It's really interesting to me that all of this was funded and studied by the government, and while I do believe that all of the information on remote viewing does speak to some of what has been learned, I imagine that there's a lot that hasn't been published. And I also imagine that there are many techniques and methods used by individuals with psi abilities that are never even spoken of, let alone studied. This is stuff that anyone can do, and I'm sure there are many people out there with their own techniques and their own abilities. I recently had to do a full day of driving and decided to listen to an audiobook that two friends were also reading called Psychic Witch by Matt Aron. I was amazed to find out that so much of what was discussed in that book was exactly in line with the topic of remote viewing, and this just goes to show that there are many pathways to the same understanding. In fact, I grew up with the slogan, "Truth is one, paths are many," and that only becomes more and more real for me the longer I live. There's a fundamental truth out there, you know? There's truth, and all these things are pointing to it. The book Psychic Witch explores the various clairs: clairvoyance, inner vision, clairgustance, a sense of taste, clairsalience, a sense of smell, clairaudience, a sense of hearing, claircognizance, an inner knowing, clairsentience, a sense of feeling, clairempathy, an inner knowing of others' emotions, and clairtangency, the ability to access psychic information through your hands. And an example of this that I read online was like the kind of people who can touch something and know information about the person who owned it last, or the history of that object, or where it was from. They kind of get it through their hands. When I think of remote viewing specifically, it seems really clunky and slow compared to some other psychic abilities because you have to follow a protocol and it involves other people and it can so easily be misinterpreted. The most amazing version of accessing psychic data seems to be, in my opinion, the out of body experience where someone can just go to a place in a disembodied way, but still experience the data of that place through all of their psychic senses. This is something that can happen spontaneously or through training. No matter what, meditation plays a part in all of these practices and seems to be foundational for being able to do more than just accessing data, like to be able to remote heal, for example. And this is also something that Russell Targ talks about later in the book. So here's a little story tangent. I got my first car as an adult after college because I was moving from San Francisco, which is a public transportation place, to Los Angeles, which is a place where you need a car. You kind of need a car. And I got this car and I named the car Henry because at that time I was reading Henry Miller and I was just loving his voice. He was just voracious for life, raw, nasty, inappropriate, and so real. And I don't know if it would still read that way to me today. So, I was in my 20s, but I thought it was so cool at the time. And maybe I'll have to reread again and find out what I think of him now. But Russell Targ has this quote from Henry Miller in Limitless Mind. And this is the quote: "The goal of life is not to possess power, but to radiate it." So when it comes to consciousness, our limitless minds, and everything psi and paranormal, maybe this is a good quote to keep in mind. The sun is powerful and simply shines. So much life is possible because of the sun just being a glowing sun. And maybe all of the psychic stuff is leading us to the same simple place, a place where once we know our true nature, all there is to do is just be. I'm open to this possibility. And also, I'm excited about all of the worldly things there are to learn and do in the meantime. And when it comes to disclosure, wouldn't it be great if all of our human lie detectors were functioning optimally? Wouldn't you like to feel confident when it comes to your ability to read between the lines, to hear the meaning behind the words, to see the true face behind the mask and know which threads to follow and which to ignore? Maybe meditation, natural ESP, and remote viewing are keys. For me, working with my own intuition and mental abilities has already proven to be extremely useful in my personal life, and trust me, you're psychic too. It's a great time to get to know our incredible bodies, the ultimate technology, and our limitless minds as we all step forward into a greater collective understanding of reality and consciousness. And hopefully it will help us in our understanding of and communication with non-human intelligence. So thank you, as always, for tuning in to Shock's Talks. I will hopefully see you next time, and I'll have more on UAP updates, UFOs, aliens, and the world of thoughts. We'll take a look at Ingo Swann, and maybe I'll have had time to read Encounters by the next time I record an episode. So there's lots of good links below, as always, and I really hope you'll leave a couple comments on this video or on any of my other videos. I want to know what you want to know and also what you think. All right, thank you, and I'll see you next time.